Okay, it's 6:05, so I guess we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so this is CS 199 EMP, even more practice. And I'm Akhila Ashokan. I'll be one of your TAs for this session. Can everybody hear me okay? If you can't, just let me know in the chat. I'll monitor the chat as we go along. And you can always use your Zoom reactions to let me know what you think. So just to introduce myself, I'm a first year master's student. I am a TA for 125 and a TA for this class, I guess. And so you'll see me here, and I have office hours before this on Tuesdays and Fridays. You can also find me on the help site on Sunday evenings. So yeah, so that's me. So we'll keep going. So course details, you can find most of this information on the calendar and on the forum, but I'll go over it anyways. We have this session that happens at 6 a.m. on Tuesdays and Fridays, and I run those sessions. And then we have one that's at 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. CST on Tuesdays and Fridays that Jackie runs. So if this is a more easier time for you guys, and join this one. If you prefer this time, then join Jackie's sessions. So the goals of the course, 199 EMP, so that's even more practice. It's really intended to give you guys some more practice problems to work with, some extra help, some extra assistance, because the more you look at this, the more often you do coding, the better you get at it. So what we'll do is we'll kind of review some of the topics that we have planned for each session, and then we'll do breakout rooms, I guess, and you guys can work on some problems and discuss it. And since we just have 2 students, we will put you guys together, and maybe Harsh and I will join just to see if we can give you guys some help, or maybe we can just all sit here together and do it. Up to you guys. So yeah, just let me know when we get there. Yeah, and this is supposed to be an interactive, safe environment. So if you have questions, if you have concerns, feedback is always appreciated. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, and so this is a safe environment for everybody. And yeah, so we don't encourage you guys to share code, but this is always collaborative learning activity. Okay. So before we go over the topics for today's class, I'll just direct you guys to some of the resources real quick. So there is the website that you can use to find the link to attendance and the link to feedback. And there's also slides for each of the sessions. And probably what's more useful is the EMP mega thread that's on the forum. So please check that out, pin it if you need to somewhere. It has all of the links that you'll need, and Jackie and I will post polls on there regularly to decide what topics we want to cover. And then we'll probably post the links to our recordings there too. We'll post all of the recordings on our personal YouTubes. So that is the plan for now. All right, so today's topics will be covering variables and data types, operations on variables, and conditional expressions and statements. So before we get started, are there any questions about the course? And this is the course website, by the way.
I have a question.
Mhm.
So would the session on Thursday be the same as the session on Tuesday?
Will the session on Tuesday be the same as the session on Tuesday, or is Tuesday and
Yeah.
Friday?
Oh yeah, Tuesday and Fridays. Sorry, my bad. So like, do I have to attend so I sign up for the course for credit. So do I have to go to just one session per week, or do I have to go to both?
I think they're different. They're going to be different topics. They'll cover different topics. But I think you only have to attend like 12 sessions. I could be wrong for.
Yeah, it's 12.
Yeah, 12 sessions. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. But the two sessions that run on each day, like the one that I'm doing now and the one that Jackie's doing later today, they're the same thing. They'll cover the same material.
Okay, gotcha.
All right. Cool. So let's get started with what are variables. This is, I think, the first lesson we covered in 125. So we should be familiar with this. So they're essentially what stores data in programming. We use them to reference the data. We use them to make manipulations on the data. And so this is the general structure for how we're going to be initializing the variables. So you have the data type, which we'll get to here, but and then you have the variable names, which you can set to be whatever you want, but they are typically you want them to be something meaningful. So if we're talking in the context of integers and we're talking about age, you'd want to give it a meaningful variable name of age. And you'll see why this is important later on when you get to more complicated programming. Variable naming in general should be meaningful just to make it easier for other people to read your code, to understand your code, and so that you can keep track of what your code is actually doing, you know? So that first line is example of variable declaration. And then you'll see we are referencing this very same variable name again, and we're initializing it with a value. And so this is separated into two separate steps, the declaration and the initialization. But you can combine them all into one line like this. So it's just the data type, the variable name, and the value. So I know when you're first starting out, it can be a little confusing to remember which one to put first, how do we set up the equal signs, where do they go? But this is the general format, and just get used to it as you see more and more code. Okay, so then I'll just go through some examples of variable declarations. So we talked about the four major categories of the primitive data types in Java and class, but I'll review them: the integers, doubles, booleans, and character types. And integers are usually the whole numbers, no fractional or decimal points or anything like that. Double is you have usually some floating point, decimal point value that you want also associated. And then Boolean is just true, false. So that'll be just anything that's true, false, or you can think of it also in terms of zeros and ones. So 0 would be false and 1 would be true. But you just see it written out as true and false. And when you see true written out like this in Java, that indicates that's a special keyword that means it is a Boolean variable. Does that make sense? And then the character types use to store like characters, that's it, or like a letter. And then later on we'll see strings and things like that. But these are the major ones that we've covered so far, I think. And are there any questions before we get to the practice problem, or if there's? Yeah. feel free to use the chat or unmute yourself. Okay, I guess we'll get started with the practice. So there are 4 questions on here. I guess we'll give you guys some time to do this on your own. Ask questions if you have. We won't do breakout rooms because, as Harsh said, we're just 4 people. But that's okay. We're gonna make this work. And yeah, go ahead and get started. So if you want to code this up, code up your answers, you can go to the playgrounds on the website. And you can use that, like any of them will work, I think. Yeah, my bad. Yeah, so you can just write it over here and you can hit the run button and it should run. Yeah, feel free to collaborate if there's any questions. Okay, so I think it's about been 5 minutes now, so we can take a look at the solutions. All right, so the first question was to declare a variable called first letter with the first letter of your name. So since it's a letter keyword here, you could use a character type and then set it, in this case, to J and use single apostrophes. The second one was has good sleep and set it to true if you had good sleep and false otherwise. And that's what this looks like. So for these two, 3 and 4, the third one was minimum GPA. And you know that GPAs usually have a decimal associated with it. So that's when you know you can use a double. You need a double there. And then in the case of the last one, meals per day. I guess you could have, no, I think most, if you were going to say meals per day, it would be in integers. And so you would choose to put an int. So I know I explained that kind of quickly, but are there any questions on that? Did anybody have trouble with that? Okay, no question. All right, so let's keep going. All right, so now we're going to talk about operations, which are essentially what you can do with variables. And I think this was the second topic that you guys covered in class. So for integers and doubles, there is the usual things that you could do with numbers, like adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, and these are the associated symbols for that. You guys should be familiar with those. And then you can also, in Java, there's a shorthand version of adding and subtracting or multiplying and dividing, and then assigning it back to the original value using this shorthand. So that's when you usually see the actual operand and then an equal sign. Yeah, and you'll have to use this in the practice problems also. And when we get there, I'll show you an example of how that's done if you guys don't figure it out. And then of course you can do incrementing and decrementing with the double plus sign. So just remember that if you only have one of the sign, then it's just you're gonna add or subtract with another integer or double. Like, so you have to show like two different variables or the same variable twice. Whereas with decrementing or incrementing, you'll have two of the operands together like this, plus plus and minus minus. And then that just increments it or decrements it by 1. Okay, and then on booleans, really the only operation you can do with them is negation, I think, yeah. And negation is just flipping it to the opposite. So booleans just have two values, trues and false. And when you negate true, you end up with false. So it kind of flops, basically flip-flops, yeah. Yeah, any questions on that? Or anything you need me to review on this specifically before we look at some problems? Okay, so I'll keep going. All right, so here are the next set of questions. These have to do with operations, and I will give you guys 10 minutes. So 6:36 a.m. We can discuss the solutions and maybe, yeah, that's good. All right, then we're at 6:36, so let's get back into it. Is anyone interested in sharing their solution to this, how they approached it? You can unmute yourself or you can type it in the chat.
Oh, yeah, I can share mine.
Okay.
Do you want me to share screen or just explain it?
Just, you can just put it in the
Oh,
chat.
okay.
And then if you want to just talk about it.
Wait, okay. Someone's already heard in the chat. Okay.
Oh, okay, yeah, I see that. Okay, so I'm sorry, I think I might mispronounce your name if I try to say it, but Jianing, do you want to try to explain the solution? Or I can try to explain the solution.
Yes, but maybe I can go first, I think, because I'm the later one who share my solutions.
Okay. So you want
Yeah, I'm enrolled.
I'm gonna mispronounce. Yeah, I'm gonna mispronounce. Okay.
Okay.
Do you want to share? Okay.
Yeah. This is mine. So for the first one, since the number of people are integer whole number, so I put int as the what's it called, the data type, and then I did the increment, and then I did the +7 below that, and then I just printed it out to see what I got. And then for the second question, I did the because it asked us to do Boolean, so I just did that. And since I've drank water, I said it's true. I assigned it to true, and then I did the exclamation mark to flip those signs.
Yep, both of these look really good. So I will share the solution since you guys both got it spot on. Were there any issues or questions that you had about this? Did you run into any errors when you were trying to run it?
No, just some careless mistakes, like forgetting to put the semicolon and stuff.
Okay. Yep. So this is the official solution, but I think you guys nailed it. Great job. Yep, looks perfect. Yep, so the main thing to notice here that when you're making these manipulations to the variable again, you don't need to use the data type. You can just use the operands. And then when you printed it out, it should have been false. I think you said that. All right, so let's continue. So now we'll go into conditional expressions and statements. So we use conditional expressions and statements to evaluate whether essentially to evaluate whether a conditional expression is either true or false. And then once we get a value for that expression, we can decide how to proceed in the code. For example, you might have a variable that in your code, like you had people in Zoom equals to 4. So you might want to say, if there are 4 people in the room, then I want to do this in my code. So in order to check if something is equal to something else, you would use the double equal sign. So this is very different from what you're probably used to when you're checking for equality in general in math and things like that. But in Java, we use a double equality sign in order to check if 2 variables or 2 literals, 2 anythings are equal to each other. you'll see that later on there we use some other different kinds of things in order to check equality, but for now, this is what you need to know. And then you can also check if two things are less than something or greater than something, or less than or equal to and greater than or equal to. But those you should be pretty familiar with. They're the same as you would see them in like math, your traditional math symbols. Yeah, just remember that this order with the equality has to be the greater than symbol and then the equal sign, and then the less than symbol and equal sign. It does matter what order it's in. You'll probably get an error, a syntax error, if you don't keep it like this. So that's conditional expressions, and then conditional statements are essentially just the next, you use conditional expressions to create conditional statements, and conditional statements are also known as just like if statements, and if statements just check if something is true or false, and then based off of the value of the conditional expression that's evaluated, you will make a decision in your code, or you will choose to execute some piece of code. Okay, so this will be a good example to walk through that. So you have a double variable meal cost, and it's equal to these two variables. Example of the plus operation, and then you can multiply the meal cost by 1.08 and then set it equal to meal cost. That's what happens in this line of code, and you're seeing the usage of the multiplication and equality operand right here. So in this next line, we're checking if the meal cost is greater than 10. If it is, then we set the value of meal is expensive to true. If it's not, we set it equal to false. So this is a conditional expression. And we're just checking if meal cost is greater than, and if it is true, then it's this Boolean value is set to be true. And if it's false, this Boolean value is set to be false. Okay, so far so good. Dope. Okay, so all right, so now we'll talk about the conditional statements. So these are just if statements. We call them if-else statements if there's an else clause to it. And they just check if this conditional expression in here is true or if it's false. And if it's true, then you execute what is given in between the curling braces. So if the meal is expensive, if this Boolean variable initialized here is true, then we'll print this out. So this is another way of writing this, and the only reason why it's another way of writing this is because this is checking if meal cost is greater than 10, which is the same thing as this Boolean variable here, which is equal to if the meal cost is greater than 10. All right. So are there any questions on this part? Okay, I won't keep going then. All right, so this, we have you 10 minutes to work on the last set of practice problems. So we'll meet back at 6:55 and we can go through the solution then. All right. It's 6:55. And yeah, so let's review this last question. And for this one, since it's a little bit more involved, I will type out the solution. So the first one is declare a variable my age that contains your age. So age is typically going to be an integer, so I just want to do my age. And then for the second piece of it, this declare a variable called can buy alcohol that is true when my age is greater than or equal to 21 and false otherwise. Okay, so it's Boolean. And it's, what is it called? Can buy alcohol. Can buy alcohol that is equal to true when my age is greater than or equal to 21. Okay. So what you can do here is you can do this. Right. So this is just saying if my age is greater than or equal to 21, then set Boolean can buy alcohol equal to true, otherwise it is equal to false. And next piece of it is write a conditional statement that prints get out of my store if can buy alcohol is false. Okay, and then yeah, if so you're going to check if it's false. So you have to can buy alcohol. Okay, and then I go and it wants to print out get out of my store. Okay, and all right, so then the last piece of it was add an else statement to the if statement that prints what can I help you with? When will this print? And it's okay, so this will print. Does anyone know when this will print?
What can I help you with?
Yes, yeah, I guess in this case. But in general, when would this be true, ignoring my age?
Wait, what was the question again?
So when would the else statement be true, ignoring my actual age here? Like what would the value of can buy alcohol have to be in order for this to print?
Oh, it has to be true then. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, so I think that's everything for this session. Are there any questions? Like we got 2 more minutes. So this is just a helpful reminder for what an if-else statement looks like. So remember that there is always 2 curling brackets, and the expression goes in the parentheses, and this is the code that executes if this expression is true, and this is the code that executes it if it's not true. So just a helpful reminder. These slides are up on the website, and feedback, attendance links are also on the website. Feel free to spam us on this thread. No, don't spam us, but leave some comments, suggestions. That's it.
All right, thank you, Akhila and Harsh. Bye-bye.
Thank you.